Dr. Shabir, the question is, does the Quran accept speaking in tongues? And I have no idea what that means, so you're going to have to explain it to me first.
Sure. So let me explain then. So there's a history behind this. In the book of the Pentateuch, in the Torah, it is mentioned that Moses said that he wished that all of God's people would be prophets, and so that they would prophesy on behalf of God. And in the book of Joel, there is a mention that something like this will happen. The Spirit of God will come on people, and everyone will start prophesying. In the Acts of the Apostles in the Christian New Testament, it is mentioned in chapter 2 that something like this did happen. The Spirit of God came in like a strong wind and separated up into tongues of fire, or what looks like tongues of fire, and landed on the disciples of Jesus. And so they each began to speak in a different language. So the people who had gathered for the pilgrimage that season, the Jewish pilgrimage that was, Pentecost is called, 50 days after Passover, and thus 50 days after the occasion of the crucifixion. Then the disciples were all recognized by the gatherers to be speaking in a wide variety of languages. So this obviously is a miraculous occurrence. More than this, we find in some of the letters of Paul, like in his letters to the Corinthians, that Christians continue to do this. In their gatherings, there will be somebody who will be speaking in a foreign language, and some other person may be serving as an interpreter of that foreign language for the rest of the congregation. And apparently this would be viewed as messages from God coming to this individual who is so inspired at the moment. At the same time, Paul cautions those who are doing this that we already have the message delivered through the prophets and through Jesus and so on, so we should not give too much credence to what is being spoken about, especially if somebody is speaking in this foreign language, and if there aren't interpreters on hand to tell us what they mean. It might be that in a congregation, each person is speaking in a different language, and nobody understands each other. So what would be the purpose of the whole thing? Nonetheless, the practice of speaking in foreign tongues as a charismatic sort of expression remains in some churches, most notably the Pentecostal churches. But some of the Christians think that this gift of speaking in tongues was a gift given to the original and earliest generation of Christians, and that it's no longer a gift that Christians should expect to have today.
So what about the Quran?
Okay, so now the Quran, that's the question. Now, the Quran does not mention anything like this as a manifestation of God's presence with and guidance of the believers. Nonetheless, the Quran speaks about God's Spirit being with the believers. وَأَيَدُهُمْ بِرُوحٍ مِّنْهُ. God fortifies the believers with the Spirit from Him. And God's guidance is with the believers. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Whoever strives in our way, we will guide them to our paths. So God's guidance and Furqan and so on is with the believers and His Spirit, but it's not in that way that they start speaking in foreign languages.
Thank you for explaining that to me, Dr. Shabir Ally.
You're welcome.